Hello and welcome back to my Outlaws of Thunder Junction limited set review. Today I'm talking about the black cards. And how good I think they're going to be. Specifically in limited, I'm not really as much of a constructed player. If you haven't been here before, these are the tiers I use. They're a little bit different than some of the other grading systems other people like to use. They're fairly straightforward though. Tier 1 is the best cards, Tier 5 is the worst cards. You will kind of get a good sense of what I mean by this. If feel free to pause and take a look at the tiers before we get started. And we're just going to get started with Ambushed Gigapede. 4 black for a 6/2 with Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, target of creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So, this card is very interesting. So I don't think it's amazing, right? I've put it, in tier 3, which is not. I don't think it's going to be super premium, all that stuff. But, a 6 mana spell that has Flash does mitigate some of the downside of the 6-drop. It does make it a little bit more high impact. You can flash this in on your opponent's turn, and it can be pretty devastating, right? Like, this does have pretty high upside. It, I mean, at the end of the day, this is just going to be removing something. There's going to be a token on the board, right? There's just all these outlaw tokens running around in this set. There's going to be something for this to target a significant percentage of the time. Unlike in MKM, Ward is not. You know what I mean? Part of the reason there were creatures that had ETB like deal damage or -X/-X and MKM weren't very good is that there was just a bunch of Ward creatures running around. So that problem's no longer here. I think this card's okay. I don't think it's super amazing. Again, hard to put a high priority on 6 drops, but I think this one's totally serviceable. Binding Negotiation. When in a black for a sorcery, target opponent reveals their hand, you may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, they discard it. Otherwise, you may put a face-up card exiled into their graveyard. So essentially, you look at your opponent's hand, and you can cause them to discard a card. It's like a Thoughtseize. It's 2 mana. You can also take one of their plotted cards and remove it. So, I mean, out of the sideboard, this card, if your opponent has a lot of plot spells, is probably worth bringing in. I don't know. Even then, you really only have like a 1-turn window to get rid of a lot of the plot cards. Most plot spells, once your opponent plots them, they're going to want to just cast them the first turn that they can. So you don't have a huge window of time. And the biggest problem with these type of effects is that you do top deck them some percentage of the time, and in those scenarios they're not great. Also, in limited, it is a lot to be paying to remove something from your opponent's hand that is not the battlefield, right? Like, if you cast this on turn 2, your opponent has 2 3-drops. Like, they don't really care that, like, you take their better 3-drop, but do they really care that they're playing a worse 3-drop? Probably not, you know what I mean? So it's like that's kind of a disaster scenario that does come up a decent percentage of the time. Black Snag Buzzard. 2 and a black for 2/1. Flying when it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if a creature died this turn and it is plot for 1 and a black. So I think I should move this up to tier 3. The reason I have it in tier 4 is that it, a 3-mana 2/1 flyer, like even if you just printed a 3-mana 3/2 flyer, it's not very good. It would be okay, of course, but it wouldn't be good by any. No, you know what? I'm leaving it here. The only reason I could see this being in your deck if you have enough synergies with the plotting, you know what I mean, thing going on. Because you are essentially getting a 2-drop. You can sort of think about it as getting like a 2-mana 2/1 flyer, but the 2-mana 2/1 flyer is like has a stun counter on it or something. I don't know. Like a Sleep Cursed Fairy type deal. 2-mana 2/1 flyer ETB tapped. Is that a good way to think about this? How would I think about this creature differently if it said that on it? Maybe it lets you get an attack in, but like not realistically, because on turn 3, I guess you could kill your opponent's creature and then play this. It's a 3/2 flyer, and that's like okay. I don't know. The best case scenario with this card is that it's like a 2-mana 2/1 flyer, and then you get it on turn 3, and you can like double spell, and that's like a thing that you want to be doing. I don't know, man. I'm not seeing it. It could be one of the things that comes up with these type of effects, like when they would do a set mechanic like this. There will be some genre of these type of cards that will be good, like generically good, and like some genre of them that will be generically bad. Um, this could fit into either of those genres. So one genre that could be end up I could see generically being good is plot two. Just if anything says plot two on it, it's a good card, and it's possible that that's like going to be the case because just being able to spend 2 mana specifically is a good increment of mana to be able to spend. And it may just be that plot two is an inherently valuable thing to have access to, and it also may be that creatures that want to stay in exile are inherently bad. So this is kind of pulling me in two different directions. I'm going to leave it in tier 4. I'm not super excited about it. You'll probably play this more often than I'm maybe giving it credit for even, but I'm not excited about this card. Blood Hustler. 1 black for a 1/1. Whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability triggers only once each turn, and you can pay 3 black to drain your opponent for 1. Yeah, I'm pretty, as you can see, not excited about this. The biggest problem is that a 2-mana 1/1 is unacceptable. Like, that's just a really unacceptable card. Committing crimes is easy, but it's not free. Like, it's not completely free. Especially on turn 3, which is when you need to be doing them the most. Like, if your 2-drop isn't good on turn 2, it's just not, like, you know what I mean? Like, where are you getting 4 mana to drain your opponent for 1? Like, it's just not happening. Like, you're just never having that access to that. So, that ability basically doesn't matter. And committing a crime, being limited to once a turn is tough because committing crimes on your opponent's turn is a lot more difficult than doing it on your turn. There's just not any excitement about this card for me. I think just the base rate is too bad. Boneyard Desecrator. 3 back for a 3/4 menace. Sacrifice another creature. You can pay 1 black to sacrifice another creature and put a +1/+1 counter on it. If an outlaw was sacrificed this way, create a treasure token. Yeah, again, not super excited about this. We've seen, 4 mana, 3/4. We saw a 3/3 that was kind of similar to this. That cost 1 in LCI. That card wasn't very good. I don't expect this to be that much better. Making a treasure when you sacrifice an outlaw is nice, but honestly, there isn't as much to do with treasures as there is to do with creatures in this set from a sacrificing perspective. So I think, it's not going to be as valuable as it would be in, say, like an AFR or like another treasure, even though March of the Machine had more treasure-related stuff going on than I think this set does. So I'm not super jazzed about the treasure. Generally, yes, the mercenary tokens are outlaws, so that's good, but I think you'll play this in some black decks that need a sack outlet. It's 4 mana. It's just not where you want to be. Caustic Bronco. 1 black for a 2/2. Whenever it attacks, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to that card's mana cost. If it isn't saddled, and otherwise each opponent loses that much life. So, essentially this is like a 2 mana 2/2, like sort of kind of Dark Confidant a little bit. You're not going to want to saddle this very often. It's on turn 3, if you have like a free, you'll do it if you have a free attack. So essentially what that means is if you play this on 2, your opponent plays a 2-drop. On turn 3 you could go, alright, I will play my 3-drop, and then I'll attack with this and saddle it using my 3-drop, because my opponent basically has to trade with this thing, because this is going to just hit them for whatever. So that's kind of how I see the average play pattern with this going. Obviously this is like a high value target. It gets better with tricks and stuff. I think it's a solid 2-drop, and as a result it's tier 2. It's just, again, if this were more expensive I would like it less, but because it's cheap and can get in early, it can draw your cards early and whatever, I do like it. I don't think it's amazing, but I do think it's good. Consuming Ashes. 2 black for an instant, exile target creature. If it had mana value 3 or less, surveil 2. So we saw this in Dominaria United, except instead of surveilling 2, it gained 3 life. That card was basically tier 2. I would rate Surveilling 2 and Gaining 3 life as fairly comparable. It really depends on the matchup. Like, it depends on the format, right? DMU was by no means a fast format, and I actually think this card would likely have been better in DMU, and the one in DMU would likely have been better in this format, probably. Um, Kind of is how it is what it is. Yeah, it's just good. It's just good to get extra value in your removal spells. You are targeting things that are mana value 3 or less a lot. That just happens. It happens more than you think. And when you're not targeting something mana value 3 or less, you don't care because you're killing the thing that you need to kill. So yeah, this is good. This is solid removal. It has gotten, you know, I do wonder, right? Because again, DMU was a set where this effect was especially good. There were high value targets and boards were not very wide. Um, is this going to be a more wide boardy set? That is the one concern with this card. It could cause me to rate it a little bit lower. Um, Even just because there are going to be wider boards on this set with the mercenary tokens and whatever, but there's still going to be like high value targets. And again, this is sort of giving you a rebate on killing something smaller. So I think it's going to be fine at the end of the day. Corrupted Conviction. Single black mana for an instant is additional cost to cast this spell. Sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. This is Village Rites. Yep. I mean, what are you gonna do? This is Village Rites. Village Rites is a tier 4 card. It's pretty much the quintessential tier 4 card of like you do not want it in your average deck. If you were heavily doing the thing, it becomes like a tier 3 level card, an average card in your deck. You don't need to draft it highly, so tier 4. Desert Stew. 1 and a black for an instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. It gets an additional -1/-1 until end of turn for each desert you control. So I've put this in tier 3. I think in the average deck, it's going to be closer to tier 4. It's kind of like a hedge grade, right? Because in some decks, this is just going to be like the best removal spell in the deck. And in some decks, it's going to be basically unplayable. So like if you have 1 desert, this card is not even that good. You kind of need like 2 to 3 deserts for this card to start being good. Fortunately, I think you want to have like 2 to 3 deserts in like your good decks in the format. So I think this card is going to get better in those scenarios. But I also think that on average, you're not actually going to be having that many deserts. Again, early, right? Early in the format, I think this card's going to be kind of bad. It's going to underperform people's expectations. And then over the course of the format, as, people have to play more colors and, we see the desert deck actually be like good, the multicolored deserts thing, which again is kind of like the stereotypical like we've seen for the last couple of sets. There is a multicolor lands type deck where like the lands help you to, whatever. And that deck becomes better after week 1 of the format when people sort of catch on to what's good. So I expect that to be the case again in this format, and I expect the desert deck to be very, very strong in the middle to late stages of this format, and this card will get better over the course of the format, though I do think that week 1, it is likely to be underperforming some people's expectations. So I wouldn't start maybe drafting this, super highly. It is black removal, so, it may get taken highly. Now it's -2/-2 removal, which for some reason, like, the general population hates. Like, they hated Tribute to Urborg, and that card was really, really good. I don't know. Like, be advised, people are weird when it comes to, like, removal spells and how highly they rate them. So, I think this card's fine, but nothing spectacular. Desperate Bloodseeker. 1 and a black for a 2/2 with lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, target player mills 2 cards. I am a sucker for this. I don't even honestly like if you gave me Truth Serum, would I believe that this is actually in tier 2 and not tier 3? No, I wouldn't. But I just really like these effects so much. This card really just does so many things well. It enables you to commit a crime if you want. It enables you to mill yourself if you want. It has lifelink. It's a 2-mana spell. The only thing it is not is an outlaw, which honestly, it's kind of fine. Like, take it or leave it. I think the Outlaws theming is kind of light, and you're gonna. It is better to have Outlaws than to not have them, but I think it's light enough that you're going to be fine that this is not an outlaw. You're going to be happy to play it. I think lifelink is just really good with lands that shock or ping your opponent. And existing in the format, lifelink just becomes better in those formats. Um, so yeah, I really like this card. I like it a lot. It's like my favorite card in black, and I'm really excited to play with this thing, even though I will, inevitably regret my words and my deeds. Fake your own death. 1 and a black for an instant, until end of turn. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, and you create a treasure token. So, we've seen this effect pretty much every set. I like it more than the usual version of this effect because it makes a treasure token. I did talk earlier about how I was not super excited about treasure tokens. This is a little bit of a different case because, you're getting more value. There is also the there's just I think this card is just going to play better than the average effect of this usually does. Why do I think that? I don't know. It's never great, okay? It's never these effects are never great. This one I think is better than usual. Treasures are better than not treasures, so that's kind of how I feel. Giving you the mana rebate and amongst other things makes this more playable than usual, but still not super excited about it. Forsaken Miner. 1 black mana for a 2/2 that cannot block. Whenever you commit a crime, you pay black mana. If you do, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we've got another one of these 1 mana Skeletones. I just, realistically, I don't think this is as good as the one from, I think it was DMU, the 2/1 that came back when a non-skeleton, you could pay 2 to bring it back when a non-skeleton died. I think that one is better than this one. Again, I know that one needs to be tapped, but can't block is just not good. A 1 mana 2/2 is great. Don't get me wrong, 1 mana 2/2 is really good. The problem is, creature stat lines just don't, you know what I mean? This just gets blocked by stuff now. If your opponent plays an 0/5 or a 1/4, this card's actively bad for you. So you really have to be getting value from sacrificing it. It is an outlaw, so if you're doing in a sacrifice deck, I think this is fine. You don't even necessarily really have to be committing tons of crimes because you're just going to be doing them anyways in black. It's just going to be happening. So I think this is a more synergistic card than I think some people will read it as. And not being able to block is really bad. Really bad. I'm not excited about that, and I'm also not excited about. What I am excited about is repeat sack outlet that you can put into your graveyard and mill or discard or whatever. I think casting this card on turn 1 is fine, and it's a better out case than these type of cards that recur usually have, but certainly not just a busted 1-drop. I think there will be some individuals that will be upset that this card exists and think it is too strong or whatever. Those people are, we don't, that's not the audience that I'm catering towards here. So I think we have to recognize can't block as being a pretty major downside. We do not have to recognize any downsides on this card though. Giza the Hellraiser. 3 black for a 4/4 ward 2 pay 2 life. Skeletons and zombies you control get +1/+1 and have menace. Whenever you commit a crime, create 2/2 tapped. 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. This ability triggers only once each turn. Yeah, this card's just actually ridiculous, especially if you have any ways to cheaply commit a crime, 1 or 0 mana ways, and there are several ways to do that in the set. Not an overwhelming amount, but the fact that you could just play this on turn 6 and whatever. You could even play it on 5. Honestly, you can play it on 5. Your opponents, it sucks if they remove it, but they're still paying 2 life. You're still getting 2 life out of the deal. You're getting their best removal spell. This card's just a house. This is just there's just really, and there's ways to you can recur stuff in black. Just a good card. Hollow Marauder. 6 and a black for a 4/2. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. It has flying. It enters the battlefield. Any number of target opponents each discard a card. For each opponent who didn't discard a card with mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. So, I've rated this very low. This is a build-around card. There are some decks where this card will be acceptable, I feel. But the problem is, we're looking at a 7 mana 4/2 flyer. Now, how easy is it to get creature cards into your graveyard? I would say very normal amount of easiness. It is not as easy as it was in LCI, and it is easier than in MKM. So, somewhere between those ranges of how easy it is to get something into your graveyard early. It's also not as easy as Brothers War. So, maybe it's about Brothers War level easiness. Either way, it is not trivial to do this. I know we talked about the black common I really like, the 2-drop that does that, but that doesn't guarantee you get any creatures in there, and if it, like, on average is going to hit one creature. Let's just say on average it gets one creature in there, great, this costs 6 mana. Like, you really got to be doing it, right? Like, for this to be 4 mana on turn 4, which is kind of your best case scenario, obviously you can, like, rip it, and it's, like, you know, whatever. Honestly, honestly, your best case scenario really is like turn 4. Like, it really is casting this on turn 4. So, 4 mana, 4/2 flying. Each opponent discards a card, and you draw a card if they didn't discard something big. That's great, right? The second line of text is really, really good. I wonder if maybe I should bump this up one tier. Like, so 5 mana 4/2 flyer. I think 4 mana 4/2 is just not achievable. I think that's just not realistic. In the average game state, in the average deck. Again, I'm talking about in the average deck. There are some decks where this card's going to be great and it's going to be like really, really impactful. But on turn 5, I'm worried about this being too bad. Like, 4/2 flyer for 5 is not a stat line I'm happy with. And maybe it draws me a card, but it doesn't block. Like, it doesn't block anything. 4/2 stat line is one of the worst blocking stat lines. I know it's not worse than 3/2, but it kind of is worse than, like, 3/2. Like, if this were a 3/2 and it cost 6 up front, I would be much more interested in it. Like, if I could take 1 mana and 1 point of power off this thing, I would be much more excited. But I'm just not that excited about this on turn 5. Again, some decks, if you can make this work, if you have, like, multiples of this, and you're, like, self-milling a bunch, and you're, like, you have multiple, like, you have, like, 3 of the 2-drop, and, like, 3, and you're playing black-green, and you have the, like, the Nervous Gardener, or not the Nervous Gardener, the Eccentric Farmer variant, then maybe you can make this work. But I think in the average deck, I'm not excited. Insatiable Avarice, single black mana for a Spree card. It is a sorcery. You can pay 2 additional colorless mana to search for a card and put that card on top. And you can pay 2 black mana to have target player draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. So essentially, you're never going to be doing that first mode. It doesn't come up in limited often enough that you should do it. And, you know, 3 triple black to draw 3 and lose 3 is just not good. So that's the end of it. Karavik the Punisher. 1 black for a 3/3. Whenever you commit a crime, exile up to 1 target black card from your graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy. If you do, you lose 2 life. So once again, it's another one of these cards that has a lot of alarm bells going off for me. It's like, uh-oh. It's like, oh, the text on this card looks like it's so great. But then I look at the card a little bit more. I take a step back and I say, oh no, there's a lot of warning signs that this card is maybe not as busted as some people are going to think. So one of the warning signs, as I'm sure you're aware by now, I see two black pips in the casting cost. That's a concern. 3 mana spell that you can't always play on turn 3 has a lot of cost associated with it. I look at it. It's a 3/3. A 3/3 is okay. It's not. I'm not complaining about it, but it's not amazing, especially on turn 4, which is when you're going to see this in a not insignificant amount of the time. Conditional ability. The ability also causes you to have to pay life. You have to pay the casting cost of the card that you exile from your graveyard. So again, all those like those little slight negatives, like the ability, it's like it reads is so powerful to be able to cast a card from your graveyard and copy it. Like that reads as being extremely powerful, and it is in the right circumstances. But I think you have to, acknowledge that that does not happen all the time, and paying a cost of 2 life to do that is not amazing. Like you're saying, well, you're paying 2 life to draw a card. It's like, well, yes and no. You're paying 2 life to draw something from your graveyard, and you also have to have done this thing. And like, yes, it's like it's not free. Like I just want to. If this card was 3 mana, 3/3, you lose 2 life and you draw a card. How good is that card? Not very good. It's medium. It's okay. Like they printed a card in the set that I have rated in the same tier as this card that is 3 mana, 3/1, draw a card, lose a life. I think that card is somewhat close to equivalent to this card. Why do I think that? Well, A, you get the card up front, and B, like there's just a lot of like minor negatives to this thing that I don't like. Lively Dirge. 1 and a black for sorcery with Spree. You can pay an additional 1 to search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. You can pay an additional 2 to return up to 2 creature cards with total mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Not excited about this. It's just too expensive. Like you're paying 4 mana to get 4 mana worth of things, and sometimes you can pay 5 to like search your best 4-drop, but like not excited about that, and just not. It's just like there's just better ways to do this. There's better ways to do this effect, and I just don't really have a lot of interest in it. Mourner's Surprise. Speaking of better ways to do this effect, 1 and a black for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Create a 1/1 red mercenary token. Yeah, I like this card. The one in Brothers War, I think this is very similar. I think this is better because the token it creates is better. But yeah, I mean, that card was sort of tier 3. This card I think is going to be tier 3. There are going to be some people that will rate it higher than that, and they are likely to be wrong because, again, a lot of us thought the Brothers War one was going to be really, really great, and it kind of ended up being okay. It was an okay filler card that was not, super amazing, but not super terrible either. And I wasn't, like, unhappy to have it in my deck, but it wasn't, essential. So I think that's kind of where this is going to end up. Neutralize the Guards. 2 and a black for an instant. Creatures target opponent controls get -1/-1 until end of turn, surveil 2. So this has a lot of things going for it. 1, it commits a crime. 2, it is giving you 2 look, 2 surveil triggers, which is great. And, it affects their entire board. It's instant speed as well, like, it kind of looks like, remember the -1/-1 effect from Lord of the Rings was, we all thought was going to be terrible, and by the end of the format, I was happy to main deck a copy of that. I wasn't, like, thrilled about it, but, like, my best decks would never main deck a copy of it, but it certainly, was serviceable. The Ring tempted me, and that's all I cared about. I think this, this commits a crime, and that might be all I care about. It being instant is also huge upside, so this can just be a huge beating. Like, against some decks, this is just an enormous beating, and I think its opportunity cost is low enough that you can main deck a copy of this and be pretty happy about it. The second copy is going to get a lot worse, but that's okay. Nezumi Link Breaker. Single black mana for a 1/1. When it dies, you create a mercenary token. Yeah, I mean, this is just great, right? Like, 1 mana, you're getting 2 bodies. We've seen that type of effect be very, very good before. This gives you 2 Outlaws for your sacrifice things. It gives you a 1-drop just being good and playable for, that being a thing that you want. Yeah, I mean, no complaints here. this thing just looks great to me. Overzealous Muscle, 4 and a black for a 5/4. Whenever you commit a crime during your turn, it gains indestructible until end of turn. So again, this is sort of your like average 5-drop, your 5-drop that doesn't have an ETB type rating for, these style of cards, tier 4, maybe it should even be tier 5. I'm not excited about this card. It has upside in the sense that it attacks pretty well on turn 6. Like, you can attack into your opponent's stuff and they kind of can't really block it very well, which is nice, but I think, doesn't play great defense, dies to any removal spell ever, unless, of course, you have... It's actually only during your turn, so be advised. It does just die to sorcery speed removal. Yeah, so you can't even predict that on your opponent's turn with instant speed crimes, which makes it actually significantly worse than if you couldn't do that, but I don't think it's great either way. Pitiless Carnage. 3 and a black for a sorcery. Sacrifice any number of permanents you control to draw that many cards. And you can plot for 1 black. So, the really cute thing to do with this is to plot it and then sack all your lands. You can tap out and then sack all your lands and draw like 7 cards if you're about to lose. That will happen a lot with this card, because when you plot it, you will be going down a card to do essentially nothing, which is really bad. You will be on the verge of losing a lot when you plot this card, because your opponent's going to be like, oh wow, they really just spent turn 3 doing basically straight nothing. And it's like, okay. Like, yeah, this card is pretty horrendously bad, I think. And it just... try to think of a scenario where it's good, and there just isn't a scenario where it's good. What scenario is this good in? I'm like, I personally cannot think of one. I can't find a scenario where this card's good, so I'm not going to continue to try to do so. Rakish Crew. 2 and a black for a enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 mercenary creature token with, and I'm not going to read the ability every single time. So, and then whenever an outlaw you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. For some reason, I thought that that text disappeared. I knew that text was there, but I thought it disappeared for some reason. I don't know. Something was wrong with my brain. That's okay. Yeah, I actually like this. I've come up with this quite a bit. So I started a little bit low because I was like, oh, it's only when an outlaw you control dies. But then I was like, that's a lot. I was like, there's a lot of those, and they're like all the best cards are outlaws. Like, a lot of the best cards in this set are outlaws. And it gives you 1 on the house. Essentially, this sort of reads like 3 mana, you make a 1/1. When the 1/1 dies, you drain your opponent for 1. That's not very good, but if you get 1 more drain out of this enchantment, it's like... That kind of sounds like pretty close to Vampire Spawn, and if you get 2, which I think is pretty reasonable... I think that's like a reasonable thing that can happen in like the average game. You're doing it, like you did it. If you get two triggers beyond the first with this card in the average game, I think it's great, and I think that is going to be happening more often than not. So I like it. Rattleback Apothecary. 2 and a black for a 3/2 with Death Touch. Whenever you commit a crime, target creature you control gains menace or lifelink until end of turn. So you can do this as many times as you want. There are not that many ways to repeatably do crimes, so it's just not really going to be a thing that matters that you can do this a lot. So, I mean, again, like, that's, why they did it this way. Yeah, this card's fine. The base rate is like, whatever. Like, it's a 3/2 Death Touch for 3. I'm not excited about that. It's not terrible either. It is what it is. But I think this is a totally fine card, but not exciting. Raven of Fell Omens. 1 and a black for a 1/2 with flying. It's a big stat point to be not having. When you commit a crime, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, let's break this card down, right? This card is in need of a breakdown. Why do I have it graded so low? So, as stated here on the slide, it needs to trigger 2 times for it to be good, right? Like, if this card triggers once, it's terrible. It's unplayable. If this card triggers 0 times, it's unplayable. So it has to trigger at least twice. Okay, well, is that achievable? Yeah, it's achievable, but you're not getting any help. Like, this card isn't helping you do anything. It's not defending. It defends against nothing. It blocks literal nothing. And it doesn't attack well either. It's a 1-2. It has flying, but it's a 1-2. If it were like a... If it was a 2-1 and you didn't gain the life, I think it would be considerably better. I think that would be a much better card in terms of, like, raw strength. I don't think they really do 2-1 flyers in black. I think that's kind of like at 2 mana, I think that's kind of like a blue thing. So, whatever. So that's why it isn't that. I don't think the design space exists. But, yeah, I'm not super, like... This is one of those cards that, like, I could see there being, like, this dot deck where it's like, this is the thing you're doing, and you have 4 of these, and then you are whatever. But this, you know what this kind of looks like? It kind of looks like bats. Kind of looks like Mirkwood bats, doesn't it? Doesn't it look? It looks a lot like Mirkwood bats. Just something to think about. It's just something to think about that it looks a lot like Mirkwood bats. Just something to think about. Rictus Robber, 3 and a black for a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, oh my god. When it enters the battlefield, if a creature died this turn, you create a 2/2 zombie rogue creature token, and you can plot it for 2 and a black. Yeah, I really like this card. First of all, you're getting a discount when you're plotting it, and any card where you get a discount by plotting it just seems so good to me. Paying less mana and getting, like, more stats for the thing, even if it's on a later turn, is just so good. Like, it's just really good, because it just allows you to be mana efficient more often, which is just something that you always want to be doing. Like, your opponent, like, you plot this on 3 and your opponent's like, well, I guess it's just a disaster. Like I just, like, wow, I can't ever trade with your stuff, so you're just gonna hit me. And then you can also just remove my thing, and then that's bad. And then it's like, I can also just sacrifice I can also, like, there's basically just no way for your opponent to not have this resolve and make a 2/2. There's just nothing they can do. So this is just gonna be 3 mana, wait 1 turn, make a 4/3 and a 2/2. It's like, well, like, how is that realistically? I should maybe move this up another tier. Like, this card is just sick. The more I think about it, it's really absurd. It does need the one thing keeping it at tier 1 initially was it does need help, right? Like, it does need another card to exist. But this is the type of thing where it's like the chance of you not having some way to enable this is so low that I just can't realistically imagine that being a possibility. Card's sick. Rooftop Assassin. 3 and a black for a 2/2 flash flying lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature that an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. So they've turned another dial on this 4 mana 2/2 flash flyer. They've printed many of these, and they just have never been good. And this one has lifelink now, so I'm still not excited. There are some people that have, I think, been fooled once again by this one, but yeah, not interesting to me. I think it's still too expensive. There's just not enough ways to realistically trigger this reliably. And that's the way it goes. Rush of Dread. 1 black for a spree. Each opponent's, you can pay a bunch of mana to make your opponent do half of the stuff. Like, 1 mana they sacrifice half their creatures. 2 mana they discard half of their hand rounded up. 2 mana they discard half of their hand rounded up. So basically you're paying a whole bunch of mana for them to not get rid of all their stuff. So it's terrible. Servant of the Stinger. 1 and a black for a 1/3 with Death Touch. When it deals combat damage to a player, if you've committed a crime this turn, you may sacrifice it. If you do, search your library for a card, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. Sacrificing your cards on board is not good. There are extremely high-powered cards in this set that are really nice. So, like, I don't know, you can find those if you really want to. You probably don't want to do that. This is just a fine 2-drop. This is a fine 2-drop. That's it. Shoot the Sheriff. 1 and a black, instant, destroy target non-outlaw creature. So this is an interesting one. They print one type of removal like this every so often, where it's like destroy target thing. It's the Doomblade variant, except they won't print Doomblade anymore because they're cowards. They are cowards. They won't print it because they have cowardice associated with them. Someday they will, though. They actually won't. They don't like that it doesn't hit black creatures, which, to be honest with you, I could get mad about that because it doesn't make, like, this is inherently like is a worse drawback in terms of like it not hitting, like this is worse than Doomblade, is what I'm saying. If they printed Doomblade in this set, Doomblade would be better than this card, is what I'm saying. Anyway, I don't think Doomblade's too good, by the way. I think they could totally print Doomblade and it would be totally fine. I don't know why they don't do that. They should just reprint Doomblade at some point. There's no reason to not do this. There are a lot of Outlaws in this set. I don't know the exact numbers. From what it looks like to me, it's like, I don't know. Let's say this hits 50% exactly of the creatures in the set, which I think is maybe even a bit optimistic. But it's still going to be good. Like, you're still going to play it. It's too efficient to not be good. But they actually do get worse, meaningfully worse in multiples. And it's, you know, it's one of those things where you do have to kind of understand that. But yeah, this hits enough stuff that you're going to be happy about it. Skullduggery. Single black mana for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1, and target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1. I really like this. So we've seen these 1 mana -1/-1. Target opponent's creature gets -1/-1. Do something else effects. The best one of them was Rat Out in Wilds of Eldraine, which actually made a permanent on the board for you. This is not as good as that card. However, it is a crime, which it is a 1 mana way to commit a crime, and it is a combat trick, which is very nice. Those two things I think are specifically format relevant. So, as a result of that, I have graded it as basically the same grade I would give Rat Out if Rat Out were in this set. Actually, I think I would put Rat Out in tier 2 if Rat Out were in this set. Rat Out's actually unbelievable in this set. This card is worse than Rat Out, and as a result, I'm putting it in the tier that Rat Out was in Wilds of Eldraine, because it's just, you know, this is X1 hate. There are tons of X1s running around. Giving your, like, this could just be such a blowout. Like, sometimes you're just gonna have to play around this all the time, because it's just such a blowout. I like it a lot. Tiny Bones joins up. Speaking of 1 mana crimes, single black mana for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, any number of target players each discard a card. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, any number of target players each mill a card and lose a life. So this is just a way to do crime stuff. It is repeatable. It is nice. It's a cheap 1 mana discard spell early. Yeah. Maybe actually I put Hopeless Nightmare in tier 2. This should probably be in tier 2 then. Hold on. Yeah, I moved it up to tier 2 because Hopeless Nightmare was in tier 2. It's basically Hopeless Nightmare. There's fewer synergy. You can't bargain it away, which sucks. But like, you're getting essentially the same sort of value by having your legends do stuff. So I like it. And then that actual Tiny Bones, a single mana for a Death Touch, 1/1 Death Touch. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard, and you may spend mana of any color to cast it. Yeah, I mean, I don't love this so much. I'm not like a 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch lover. There are some people that love them. I'm just not that guy. Obviously I think it's good. I've put it in tier 2. But the problem is that when it has good attacks, which is early in the game, you're not going to have anything to do to cast. And when it has things to cast, it's not going to be able to attack. So, yeah, there's a lot of tokens running around that make this maybe a lot worse. I'm even contemplating moving it down. The problem is the upside is really high. If you can find a way to get it through, it is something your opponent has to be thinking about all the time. It does trade up with their stuff. It works with bite spells. It does enough things that I'm happy to leave it in tier 2, but I'm just not super excited. Treasure Dredger. 1 and a black for a 2/2. You can pay 1 and tap it and pay 1 life to create a treasure token. Again, treasure tokens they're just not the best in this set. But they're still good. This is a serviceable 2-drop. It does let's not say ramp. It ramps, but it comes with it launders mana. It generates mana from one turn and puts it on another turn is what it does, and it fixes your mana. But it costs you life, which is not free. It is an outlaw, which is good. I think at the end of the day, this is going to look more average than anything else. Unfortunate accident. 1 for instant spree card. You can pay 2 and a black to destroy target creature. And you can also pay a single black to create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with whatever. So, 2 mana for a 1/1 flash. Terrible. 4 mana for a destroy target creature effect. Medium to slightly bad if you didn't have any other text on the card. So, I sort of put this in tier 3. I think it's good. I don't think it's excellent or anything. I think both of these effects are slightly overcosted. Having access to both of them is nice. You will sometimes get to activate this for 5 mana. That will be pretty good. You get a thing. You destroy the thing. You make a 1/1. That's good. That's a good thing to do. Sometimes you cast it for 4. That's good too. It's a good card. I don't think it's amazing. I should move it up to. I should probably move it up, huh? I should probably move it up. Having the ability to pay 1 additional mana to make a 1/1, make a token is good enough. Let me think about this. Yeah, fine. Hold on. See there. Look, are you happy now? I moved it up. It's good. Unscrupulous Contractor. 2 and a black for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Yeah, this card's sick. We saw a basically worse version of this in Fellstinger in Crimson Vow, and that card was excellent. This card is going to also be excellent. It has plot as an upside. That's great. On turn 3, you can just plot this instead of actually having to cast it. Your opponent can sit there and be like, well, I guess I'm losing this game. And they're probably right. So, yeah. Vadmir, New Blood. 1 and a black for a 2/2. Whenever you commit a crime, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability triggers only once each turn. And as long as it has 4 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has Menace and Lifelink. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if your 2-drop is a 6/6, it does not matter that it has Menace and Lifelink. It has already killed your opponent. So that line of text almost doesn't matter because it will almost, like, by that point, if your opponent hasn't found a way to deal with this, they've already lost. So, like, how relevant is that? Maybe not the most relevant thing in the world. But it's a 2-drop that grows over the time. It's really good. It's a solid card. I don't think it's busted or anything, but it's very good. And the final black card, Vault Plunderer. 2 and a black for a 3/1. And when it enters the battlefield, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Thank you, Wizards of the Coast. You have heeded some of my requests and allowed me to target my opponent with things that are obviously good for me. Thank you. I understand that it took you building an entire set mechanic around you targeting your opponent to do this thing that is just that you're allowed to do all the time. But I appreciate it. It's nice. I like being able to target my opponent with things that are usually beneficial for me, but sometimes, Basically what I'm saying is I like that you can target your opponent with Ancestral Recall, and if they reprinted Ancestral Recall, if they printed a blue card draw spell, they're not letting you target your opponent. And I don't like that. Obviously, they do it for digital client reasons, which is fine. It makes the game better to play, but I like niche applications of cards that sometimes you want to do something different than what you would expect. It makes decision-making, whatever. Anyways, yeah, this is an upgraded Phyrexian Rager. Phyrexian Rager is pretty medium these days, and, 1 toughness is kind of... I guess it's dubious whether it's an upgrade. I think it's an upgrade, even with all the 1 toughness creatures in this format. The upside of being able to trade up with something that has 3 toughness is, I think, a lot higher than the downside of not being able to attack into 1 toughness creatures or block them, because the 1 toughness creatures can also just tap to make something bigger, whatever. So I like this card. I don't love it. It's fine. That's my final thoughts on it, and that's my final thoughts on black as a color. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. It's a little bit longer than my usual set reviews. I got off on a couple of tangents there. Sometimes, we don't get mad and we get E-Trade instead, and that's, today we might have gotten a little bit mad. That's okay. It's okay to get mad. and I hope I'll see you next time.